I am Ray Toll. I am one of the 3 general co-chairs, along with Laura Rogers from NASA Langley and Dr. Dan Sternlich from the Naval Surface Warfare Center, Panama City. This next panel I have circled for many months. It's to me a very special one. About 9 months ago, the United Nations office in Paris acknowledged Oceans 2022 as one of those special conferences under this United Nations Decade of the Oceans. The Decade of the Oceans, we are in the second year. 2020 to 2030 is, by the definition, the decade. And I think the sense of this is we all know we live on a blue planet. It's remarkable how much water you can see from space. It's just spectacular. So I would like to introduce the moderator of this special panel, Craig McLean. And Craig has drafted an incredible lineup of rock stars that you're about to see on stage here. But Craig himself, in my opinion, is a rock star. He's a war hero. He's a brilliant NOAA scientist, a NOAA leader. He spent his career with NOAA, but he is a multi-talented fellow who speaks well. He's about as eloquent as ever I've met. And you're gonna love this next session. So Craig and team, again, this is a special one for me. I'm going to be taking notes. I can't wait for this one. Thank you. Craig McLean, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning. Excuse me. Good morning. How many people here were influenced by Jacques Cousteau to get you into your career? Yeah, hold them high and look around. What was that inspiration like? That was a moment, that was an aggregation of moments that really stimulated you to choose what you were going to do with your working life, your academic pursuits, and where you wound up today. And I'm sure there are many other hands that are notionally being raised remotely as people are joining us through the web. So as I congratulate MTS and IEEE OES on having this in-person gathering and having many people able to access this who maybe couldn't afford the plane ticket because they're students, I just want to ask you to remember back to those moments of inspiration in your career development when you thought, I can do that, and you're doing it today. But what is it that we're doing today? 2 things I want to remind you before I really dive in here with this exceptional panel. One is, are you training your replacement? Are you working to get the next generation, the early career professionals, or maybe those who aren't even in the career yet, interested in the career? Be thinking about that, please. And the other thing I ask you to be considering is how we, on an individual basis, are taking care of this ocean planet that we live on. Are we making those personal choices that really help carry us into a more optimistic future than the one we're living in? I'm a grandparent. One of the reasons I recently retired was to spend more time with my grandkids. I do not want them to grow up in a Mad Max movie set that is the reality of their world. And I think you might feel the same way. So that motivation is high for all of us. The UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, ponder that for a moment. That's the title of this. The UN, United Nations Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. And it's designed to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals that the UN had defined years ago, with all of the world's nations agreeing that these objectives and goals were appropriate. As we see a building middle class across the world, power, energy, the needs to provide power and energy for a growing population and greater development of middle class around the world is going to put stress on oceans, ecosystems, and this natural world. So along comes the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. It can be a little bit daunting, as I have found it daunting, to realize that there's been a marvelous flow of energy and input into what will comprise this decade. After the initial call for programs and projects and activities, there is a huge number of activities planned for the Ocean Decade. We'll hear a little bit more about that from one of our panelists, Dr. Margaret Leinen, who will be explaining to us shortly just a bit of a situational report on how many programs, how many projects. The response has been overwhelming. Maybe a show of hands. How many people in this auditorium here today have an activity that's either under consideration or has been endorsed by the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission. Fantastic, fantastic, fantastic. I'm hoping that you have a pathway towards funding. Many do, but not all do. And we need to find the route of funding. That's something else we're going to be talking about with this panel. To really give you an understanding of what's gone on since the inception of the decade and where the decade is heading and how we could do even more to find the appropriate resourcing and aggregation of global interests to be working at national levels, but also at regional and international levels. And I commend this forum because the Marine Technology Society, Oceans, and IEEE OES have consistently been carrying the banner to provide the opportunity for the visibility of the UN Decade of Ocean Science. And MTS recognized the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission Executive Secretariat 2 years ago for their work of achievement and accomplishment. Very few people at the IOC pulling this all together. So let me go back in time just real quick and we'll bring the panel up shortly. 1971, I could look around and take a guess as to who of us were where in 1971 and who weren't even born in 1971. There was an international decade of ocean exploration, 1971 to 1980. That decade was more at the discovery and the front end of scientific elements that we have today. Climate and ocean nexus. It's still alive today, and we're still trying to understand it better. That was brought about in the UN Decade of Ocean Exploration, 1971. Many of the ocean mapping, ocean observing and measurement programs that we have today started back then. That's a long time ago. It's taken that much time for us to now have another ocean-focused decade. So this is a once-in-a-lifetime, certainly once-in-a-career opportunity for us. We also had that decade created by a National Academy study, by the United States Congress, and endorsed by the President of the United States before it became a UN-endorsed entity. The United States put tax money in an appropriation into a column for the Decade of Ocean Exploration. We don't have that today. We don't have a single budgetary source for that today. Take that, do what you think you need to with it, and be communicative to your elected officials in order to determine what rightful pathway we might undertake here, at least in the States, or for those of you abroad in your home country. What we do have is a United States domestic ocean action plan, and basically it was the decadal vision that was created in 2018 to 2028, and it was very logical. If you've attended any of the ocean sessions, including this one, the UN Oceans meetings, many others, we know the problems, and those problems are easily recited as to what do we need to be working on. There was an update to that with the arrival of the Biden administration, and the Biden administration addressed areas of focus, including offshore wind, blue carbon, other very relevant subjects like coastal resilience, which was a very popular discussion item in this forum as well. So it's been updated to recognize and promote the current challenges that are on us. But we had a U.S. National Committee established at the request of the IOC. Every member state, which is code for those nations that belong to the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission, was encouraged to establish a U.S. National Committee, and we did. We established it as the Ocean Studies Board of the National Academy of Sciences. And you'll hear from Dr. Larry Mayer shortly, who is going to be explaining the work of that U.S. National Committee to try and make sense out of the many, many programs, projects, and activities that reach the original UN and IOC intent of 10 particular areas of challenge and 7 outcomes. So already I could see you're doing the math on figuring out the matrix, 10 by 7. And then you also come along with what the U.S. national plan is for our ocean decadal vision. That adds about a dozen more. And you start looking at this, and if you're a funding entity, as a government, or as an NGO, or as a philanthropy representative, it gets pretty confusing. What am I investing in and for what reason? So the brilliance of the U.S. National Committee was to define an ascending apex with crosscuts to better define and narrow the scale and scope of what we're investing towards. Right? We can't sell the success of ocean innovation and ocean advancement for the science we need for the ocean we want if we're doing it one little project at a time. So we need to be looking at it large. You're going to hear from Dr. Larry Mayer, who will explain this to you. Then we also have two representatives from federal agencies who are very important in the success of this ocean decade. We've got Dr. Sarah Kapnick and Dr. Tom Drake. And you heard from Dr. Drake yesterday in his plenary, and Dr. Kapnick is the NOAA chief scientist. So we'll hear what those two agencies are. And of course, there are other agencies involved. NASA is involved. NSF is involved. USGS, BOEM. I saw Rodney Cluck earlier today, and we were talking about the activities and the opportunities here. Every federal agency. And then we're going to land an anchor with Ben Williams from Fugro, where I think Fugro, in a simple sentence, can be identified as the most active private sector service provider in the ocean decade and in many other areas of providing free goods to the public good at the genesis and origin of their corporate willingness. So let me be a little bit more formal, and I'll ask our panelists to come on up and take your seats, and we'll begin with your presentations. So Sarah, Tom, Ben, if you come on up, please, I would appreciate that. So the first panelist that we're going to hear from is Dr. Margaret Leynen. Margaret is joining us remotely, as is our second speaker, Larry Mayer. The demands on everyone's schedule in the time and season of a UN Decade of Ocean Science is obviously not limited to that activity alone. People are many places doing many things. So Dr. Leynen is joining us from Scripps Institute of Oceanography in La Jolla, California, where she is the director. And she's also the co-chair of the UN Decade Advisory Board. So Margaret is right in the middle of the latest of where and how the decade is progressing. And I'll turn the microphone to Margaret in a millisecond. Then you're going to hear from Larry Mayer, who's at the University of New Hampshire. And I think in a simple distillation of Larry's biography, I could say he is recognized around the world as the world's expert in ocean mapping. He's at the Joint Hydrographic Center up in UNH and a very close partner of many federal agencies, including the one that I recently retired from, which was NOAA. Then you'll hear from Dr. Kapnick, Sarah Kapnick, who was an esteemed and respected early career scientist in our Geophysical Fluid Dynamics lab of NOAA up in Princeton. And more recently, Sarah went to the commercial sector and was in charge for JP Morgan of their entire climate portfolio. So a window of what do we need for society based on the financial sector, which does control what we do in the effect and aspects of the economy. So you'll hear a little bit more from Sarah as well on that side, but also where NOAA is headed. And I think that's an important consideration for you. Dr. Tom Drake will then be giving us his views on where ONR, the Office of Naval Research, is, but you heard yesterday, and just to recall, Tom is the head of the Ocean Battlespace and Expeditionary Access Department of the Office of Naval Research. He has quite a portfolio, a lot of responsibilities. And then Ben Williams, who's the Met Ocean, and just remember, for those of you who aren't indoctrinated in government speak, that's meteorological and oceanographic measurements that are being provided by Fugro, a dynamic company that is really representing itself well, as you've seen throughout these engagements on the decade. All right, so I've taken a bit of time. I would like now to invite Dr. Leynen to give us her initial remarks. We're going to go through remarks. There may be a delay, so realize our AV team has it under control. Just be mindful that there might be a delay. We're going to give 10 minutes to each speaker to offer their remarks, and then we'll have a little bit of Q&A exchange with the panel, and then we're going to open up for microphone questions from the floor. And I'm not sure how we might be taking remote questions if we can, but certainly from the floor. So with that, I turn the floor to Dr. Leynen. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Craig. Can you hear me in Hampton Roads? Great. Good.
Margaret,
and I see
your
the
first
slide.
Yes, your first slide is visible. Go ahead, please.
Great. Go ahead. Next slide. So the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development is really a framework to support efforts to reverse the cycle of decline in ocean health and create improved conditions for sustainable development, to address all of the kinds of issues that are shown on the left-hand side. But as Craig pointed out, it's not a funding source, but it's really a framework to connect all of us across the entire world in efforts to take on really big efforts to look at the ocean, to do the science that is going to result in sustainability. Next slide. So a very important piece here is that it's not just the decade of ocean science for those of us that are scientists and are curious about the ocean, but that for sustainable development piece is really key. And what we hope that the decade is going to do is give us science that is going to be able to apply to these key features that result in sustainability, whether it's coastal zone management or national ocean policies, early warning systems. The goal is these applications, not just the science. Next slide. The key elements of the science are that it's basic science, that it is co-designed with users so we get to those applications, that it builds capacity for the future so that at the end of the decade, we have a whole new generation that is working on these problems, and that engages a broad range of participants that's very diverse, and that ensures that all data are made publicly available and easily used. Next slide. As Craig mentioned, there are a hierarchy of actions that are part of the decade. And those range from what we call programs that are global, most of them are global in scale rather than regional, that they're designed to fill a profound scientific objective and conducted over the long term. They're generally interdisciplinary and typically multinational. So a couple of examples. Larry Mayer, who's going to speak next, is deeply involved with a program to map the seafloor of the ocean, the entire ocean, never done before. A very different kind of program is one that I'm involved with, the Ocean Biomolecular Observing Network, to create a coast to open ocean network of sites at which we use new genomic techniques to routinely measure the biodiversity of the ocean. And by the end of the decade, have an autonomous network like Argo that is for biology. Next slide. Oh, oops, sorry, go back one. Within the programs are projects, and those are discrete, focused activities that may stand alone but typically contribute to an identified Ocean Decade program. So those might be regional, or they might be to take on one aspect of a program. Then there are activities that are typically one-off or standalone, and this conference is an example, as Ray Tull pointed out. It's an Ocean Decade activity. And then contributions, which are support from funding organizations that support the decade through donation of necessary resources. Funding, in some cases, donation of in-kind people resources. Sometimes it's resources like access to ships. So this hierarchy of actions then allows us to work up to those major goals of the Ocean Decade. Next slide. Next slide.
It's coming, Margaret.
Okay, there we go. So where are we so far? As of the middle of last month, there were 44 programs from, as I mentioned, a wide diversity of foci of those programs, 193 projects that work in those programs and sometimes independently. 62 contributions and over 300 actions. So that is a year and 9 months into the Ocean Decade. So the community has really responded very strongly, submitting really fantastic programs to that would take place over this decade. Next slide. So what's coming next? So we have a very strong thematic and geographical diversity, although we are looking for to fill gaps in leadership from least developed countries and from small island and developing states. But the portfolio is very complete. It addresses all of the 10 challenges that have been identified for the Ocean Decade. And it has been developed through strongly bottom-up approaches. People saying, this is what we feel is necessary, and we've gotten ourselves together and have developed our own sources of funding in order to complete this. So the decade really sees itself at a critical point now, and we're at a unique window of opportunity to deliberately now look at what is missing and what we need to do before actions become too dispersed. So there's also strong demand from the decade community to shape a collective vision for the next 8 years. How do we take these programs, the 193 projects, and really knit them together in a way that they're mutually reinforcing and that they complement each other? And we certainly expect that there'll be more bottom-up proposals, but we're going to see some more activity on the part of the decade to really look at the elements that will be the crosscuts between the programs, projects, and activities. So the Ocean Decade Advisory Board will be meeting later on in November to start looking at how we purposefully ensure that over the decade we wind up being able to address those big themes that I talked to you about. And I think that is the last slide. Yes.
Margaret, thank you very much. Yeah, I must say at this point, first of all, you've given us the context and the depth and complexity of where the decade is right now, and also the recognition of getting a better sense of that orderly hierarchy, which is a lot of work. And I want to commend you for the work that you've done, both in the preliminary but now also in the active permanent board as co-chair of that board. That's a huge task on top of all of your daily tasks. So thank you for giving us that clarity of the current situation. It's mightily impressive to have 44 programs, 193 projects, and over 300 activities. And if you, for the folks earlier, as I raised, consider Jacques Cousteau and what inspiration he tried to provide for humankind with the oceans. Did you ever think that we were going to see 44 programs, 193 projects, et cetera? It's remarkable. It's truly outstanding. So to try and bring some further sense of domestic organizational prioritization to this, we asked Dr. Larry Mayer to join us and brief us on the work of the U.S. National Committee for the Ocean Decade. And that national committee has developed a set of cross-cutting priorities. And I want to thank Larry for his leadership there, but also in absentia, Rick Spinrad, who at the time was working with Larry in co-chairing this committee until Rick was appointed as administrator for NOAA. So Larry, welcome. Thank you for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Craig. And what I'd like to do for the next few minutes is try to offer a little background on the origins and the content of this newly released themes report that Craig mentioned, the cross-cutting themes report. But before I start, I really want to take the opportunity to thank you, Craig, and Margaret, for all you've done and continue to do in the development of the decade. And we all really owe you a tremendous debt. Thank you. Now, as the decade developed, I think it's fair to say that there was really great hope among the U.S. community that the U.S. would embrace and engage in the efforts of the decade. And while the hopes were there, it was difficult at the time given the priorities of the administration. And I suspect that's what led to the idea of asking the Academy to serve as the National Committee for the decade, because the Academy acts at arm's length from the government. Next slide, please. Oh, there is a delay, isn't there? Okay, I'll just keep going, and that slide will eventually show up, I suspect. In setting up the committee, the instructions to the committee, which came from the SOST, the Subcommittee on Ocean Science and Technology, were to engage and inspire the community, including early career scientists, as Craig talked about how important they are. And we were asked to think big. Words like bold and audacious were tossed around. The idea was to use the decade as a mechanism to help build a new future of ocean science in the U.S. And so the committee, and as Craig mentioned, Rick Spinrad was the vice chair of the committee at the time, and I think this was actually his idea, came back with the concept of ocean shots. And those are ambitious transformational research concepts that drew inspiration and expertise from multiple disciplines and fundamentally advanced ocean science for sustainable development. And the hope, of course, was to find things that might capture the imagination of the public, the community, and the funding agencies, much like the moonshot of the 1960s. Next slide, please. And the response to that was really remarkable. More than 100 ocean shot submissions came in, and we received about 100 applications for early career liaison appointments. And this was followed by a kickoff meeting funded by NOAA and the Academy that had more than 1,000 registrants. So we really got off to a great start, but the question then was, what could we do next? At that point in time, given the constraints of Academy committees, the committee did not have the mandate nor the ability to make selections or recommendations. All we could really do is make the community aware of the ocean shots and facilitate communication, which we did through websites and workshops. Well, that constraint was addressed in October of 2021 when SOST asked the U.S. National Committee for a consensus report that would identify cross-cutting themes emerging from the ocean shots. And so now we did have a mandate to do something in terms of recommendations, or at least put things together in a more sensible way. And in many ways, much like what Margaret described, the UN decade process is going through now. The statement of task called for the themes to be based on the submitted ocean shots and aligned with both UN decade goals and US ocean science priorities as expressed in what Craig described, the SOST decadal vision document. They asked that the themes address compelling areas for public and private sector investment and provide opportunities for inter and multidisciplinary activities in support of ocean science. Next slide, please. And so this was really a blend of bottom-up and top-down processes as we looked at the community-submitted ocean shots in the context of the UN decade challenges and outcomes, as well as in the context of the US priorities. And we tried to see if we could group the ocean shots and formulate bold interdisciplinary thematic programs that would truly support transformative research and lead to the outcomes outlined by the decade and also support US ocean priorities. Next slide, please. And we had a very short time frame. We just had about 6 months to do this. And the report was released just last June. And what we proposed were 6 themes, 2 foundational themes and 4 topical themes. The foundational themes address the underlying infrastructure of how to conduct the science. From the foundational themes, we hope to develop approaches and best practices that will ensure that information and resources are accessible, applicable, and meet the needs of diverse communities through engagement in the development of research priorities and through co-production of knowledge. The idea is that the protocols and best practices that we derive from the foundational themes will then be applied to each of the 4 topical themes. The topical themes represent the amalgamation of many of the ocean shots and decade-endorsed US actions into overarching multidisciplinary themes that represent fundamental aspects of and approaches to ocean sustainability and offer a framework under which bold new research programs can be further defined and developed. And I really have to emphasize that we're not presenting fully fleshed out research programs, but rather overarching frameworks for the development of fully fleshed out research programs. And I don't have the time to present the details of these. I refer you to the report if you're interested, but let me at least show diagrams that represent each of the themes. Next slide, please. The first foundational theme, which we call the inclusive and equitable ocean, is designed to further the development of approaches that span many stakeholder communities, to ensure the involvement of diverse groups in ocean knowledge generation. It's based on a number of ocean shots and endorsed actions that explore new approaches to education, communication, and engagement. The involvement of Indigenous peoples in co-development of research programs, new approaches to partnerships and networking, and even new approaches to funding ocean science. And as you see these diagrams, each of the lines in the diagrams represents a submitted ocean shot or a US-based UN-endorsed program or project. So this is the network that we put together under this overarching cross-cutting theme. Next slide, please. I should also mention that in the report, there's an extensive appendix with tables for each of the themes that shows the connections between the ocean shots submitted and US-endorsed actions, at least at the time that the report was written. There's been a new subset of ocean endorsed actions, and we'll try to update that. Next slide, please. The second foundational theme, An Ocean of Data, focuses on approaches of improving data availability and access through the development of a framework of implementing fair and cared data principles. It also involves the creation of a path towards a digital ecosystem for ocean data that delivers ubiquitous compute-intensive data services. Next slide. The first of the topical themes, the Ocean Revealed, represents a large number of ocean shots and endorsed actions that called for improved and innovative new ocean observations. We've brought these together envisioning a whole ocean approach to the planning and coordinated development and deployment of new technologies to measure a range of ocean variables, particularly in understudied ocean areas. This involves the development and implementation of new technologies ranging from inexpensive small sensors that would create an ocean of things to sophisticated autonomous platforms, eDNA sampling, and more standard observing platforms. It also builds on the potential of existing cable infrastructure and enhanced understanding of the ocean's acoustic environment for power communications and positioning, offering a connected backbone for many of the measurement systems. Next slide. The Restored and Sustainable Ocean theme focuses on the ocean as a source of sustenance and the restoration and sustainability of key coastal and open ocean ecosystems, with an emphasis on nature-based solutions. Next slide. The Ocean Solutions for Climate Resilience theme looks at the urgent need to anticipate and plan for coastal change in response to sea level rise and stronger and more frequent coastal storms, as well as the development and implementation of climate mitigation strategies, including the expansion of renewable energy generation and the development of carbon dioxide reduction and sequestration approaches. Next slide, please. And finally, the Healthy Urban Sea theme, which really captures many, if not all, of the other themes in a place-based approach, focuses on densely populated coastal centers where commerce, energy production, recreation, and fisheries are so dependent on and vulnerable to the interplay of the ocean environment and human activities, and are particularly susceptible to the impacts of climate change. This concentration of activity provides a spatially manageable testbed for investigating impacts from the runoff of plastics, nutrients, and other pollutants, and developing sustainable solutions for the health and resilience of urban seas, and by extension, the broader coastal ocean. These large population centers also offer an opportunity for community engagement and problems that are directly relevant to their well-being. Ocean-related issues can more easily be brought into school curricula and public events, involve diverse communities, and brought to the attention of policymakers because of the proximity of the ocean. Next slide. For the next steps, we've called for a series of theme-specific focused workshops aimed at engaging the community and beginning to put the meat on the frameworks outlined in the themes report, developing detailed research plans, identifying gaps in expertise, bringing in outside expertise where needed, and estimating cost and timelines. And that's really where we are right now. But let's go to the last slide. Tying this back to US priorities, recently SOS published a new report, Opportunities and Actions for Ocean Science Technology 2022 to 2028, that also outlined 3 cross-cutting themes. And when I read the SOS report, I was really pleased because the cross-cutting themes outlined by SOS are a little less granular, but map beautifully to the themes suggested by the committee. And so I believe that independently, we've converged on critical areas for US investment in research in support of sustainable ocean development, or in the words of the decade, the science we need for the ocean we want. The real question now is how do we ensure that we can get any of this done, which is really a question for those that control the funding. Thank you, Craig.
Larry, thank you very much. I think in the time you've spent with us here just this morning, you've really shown us how the work of the U.S. National Committee achieved what we had hoped to see, and I want to recognize once again you and Rick for convincing me that this was a wise thing to do. Frankly, one could look at this and say, oh my goodness, yet another matrix we have to match. But what this matrix did is blend matters that aren't routinely blended. If you look at the inventory of the programs and the projects, we have a lot of different observing and measurement activities. We have a lot of different modeling activities, and they're standalone. But what the work of the the committee did here was really blend those into a greater level of understanding. So I'm not going to call out people in the audience, but I would be tempted to say, how many funding entities are here and don't show your hands because I'm afraid of the rush that you will endure on your way out the door. But the idea being, for a funder to see this clarity that the Ocean Studies Board, acting as the U.S. National Committee, has generated, has really given a pathway to the importance of these investments at every level and scale of the hierarchy. All right, next we're going to hear from the Chief Scientist of NOAA, Dr. Sarah Kapnick, and I warmly welcome Sarah, as I served in that role in an acting role. I acted for 5 years, and that's, I don't know, that's unusual, but nonetheless, we have a real scientist now taking that position. And Sarah is someone who I routinely looked to inform me when I had my NOAA position, because her skill and wisdom with climate models and the application of those climate models showed me the most direct real-world benefits of the science rather than just the published paper. And I've always found great reward in engaging with Sarah in order to learn that. So if I had to write a check for tuition, it would have to go to this lady right here. But Sarah now, as the Chief Scientist of NOAA, brings in the position and the opportunities of the nation's civilian science ocean agency. Sarah, welcome.
Thank you, Craig, for that very warm welcome. It is a pleasure and privilege to get to be up here today as the new NOAA Chief Scientist and be able to address this crowd. So as Craig mentioned, my background is climate science. I built climate models, I did fundamental seasonal decadal prediction and projection, and climate risk analysis. I spent 10 years at GFDL, and then I ended up at JP Morgan, where I was helping the financial industry understand climate, understand the environment, and understand how to use that information. And now I'm bringing that experience back into this role as Chief Scientist as we chart our path forward and how science should be informing all sectors, all industries. And so my main goals as Chief Scientist, my main priorities as Chief Scientist entering into the role are scientific integrity, making sure people trust the products, the data, everything we put out, our engagement with the private sector. So there is a growing need for climate ocean data and information. It is, what I saw in the private sector was it was a growing tsunami of demand for all the information that is being put out by scientific agencies, by the scientific community. And it's only going to grow in the context of climate change as people figure out how to navigate through climate change. And so in the role as Chief Scientist, developing out NOAA's strategy, working with the private sector either in that delivery of information, but also to accelerate our science, our research, our R&D, bringing together groups in new ways that we haven't necessarily previously. But then it's also the engagement of foundations, which I'll come back to as I go through my talking points. My other priority is communication, better communicating all the science that we do, the use and information of it, externally to society, to the private sector, but also across government, the work that NOAA does and how we can be included in those conversations. And the last piece, I was struck by what Margaret mentioned on my last priority is science development for the challenges of the future. Much like the ocean decade, with the growing threats of climate change, of pollution, of marine debris and plastics, and all the things that we face, the science also needs to evolve to rise to those challenges. And some of these things are multi-year or a decade worth of work that needs to be done. And so we are looking at our priorities as an agency and making sure that we are set up on the right path for the coming years, for the coming decade. I am new to the decade. I would say about 4 months new since taking this role, but I see it as a good opportunity to accomplish NOAA's goals and priorities. And in my previous role, flying around the world talking to business leaders, CEOs, investors, philanthropists, I will also say that the ocean is a very special place across everyone's hearts. It is something that is bipartisan, internationally bipartisan. It's something that everyone deeply cares about and wants to contribute to and wants to be engaged in. So I'm really excited for being here with this group today. I would like to express NOAA's support for the Ocean Decade generally. There is broad U.S. government support for the decade. The United States government is invested in and will continue to support actions for the Ocean Decade in collaboration with national and international partners. The decade is identified as one of 6 immediate opportunities for the U.S. National Science and Technology Council's Opportunities and Actions in Ocean Science and Technology report that was released this March. This document aligns the federal government's priorities on ocean science and technology with decision-making and implementation. We see strategic linkages to the decade also with other international and multilateral movements that we see worldwide, for example, through IPCC and also discussions with the G7. These all foster an integrated and comprehensive approach to the climate crisis, with the ocean being centered in many of them. NOAA's decade leadership is a shared responsibility across all of NOAA's line offices. It's not just within the Ocean Service. We see this popping up across everything across NOAA. NOAA will continue to co-chair the Interagency Working Group for the Ocean Decade as established by the SOST. It is through that body that we encourage a broad federal engagement in resourcing the decade actions and the efforts of the National Committee. Thus far, over 14 federal agencies across the U.S. government have submitted decade actions. NOAA will maintain its internal mechanism as well, the National Ocean and Coastal Council's task force, to anticipate and staff related efforts and deliverables as well. Being more specific on NOAA's involvement in the decade, there are currently 90 decade actions in the U.S., nearly half of which are U.S. government-led, and NOAA is leading or co-leading 24 of those decade actions that tackle challenges like improving the infrastructure for ocean observing systems, improving short and long-term forecasting for harmful algal blooms, and guiding marine ecosystem management in the face of changing ocean conditions. Additionally, with Seabed 2030, this is a decade action that will produce a definitive map of the world's ocean floor by 2030. In June of this year, NOAA's administrator, Dr. Rick Spinrad, signed an MOU that formalizes the U.S. participation in Seabed 2030. The MOU also describes best practices and protocols for this type of data collection going forward, which will help build positive collaborations between all involved countries and partners. So critical action, because to map the world's seabeds, we need to have everyone engage worldwide on this issue. With this, we've also formed the Decade Collaborative Centers to provide administrative and financial support for decade action. In March of 2022, Dr. Spinrad also signed an MOU with the Georgia Aquarium, Georgia Institute of Technology, and Oceans Vision. This is the first Decade Collaborative Center that has been established in the United States and was catalyzed by $5 million from the Georgia Aquarium CEO, Dr. Brian Davis. Per the terms of the MOU, NOAA will have a seat on the advisory board of the DCC and will be involved in shaping it from the ground up. In my previous job, I saw massive interest and engagement from business leaders and foundations for figuring out how they can be engaged in the Ocean Decade. Now, as NOAA Chief Scientist, those discussions have continued and we're seeing a lot of interest. I see a need for us to collaborate and work together on what are those solutions that are needed, and I will see continued engagement and expect that there will be more work on this that we will see in the coming years to come. So thank you very much for having me. I look forward to the further speakers.
Thank you, Sarah. And once again, I want to express my delight to see someone like you who can be an inspiration to many people who may be more on the earlier side of their career, to see somebody reach such a position as the Chief Scientist of NOAA, and you do it very well. I'm delighted to hear 24 of the total 90 actions, half of which U.S. government's involved in. NOAA is involved in half of that again. So I think that's a very good, responsible level and demonstration of where we are. I think another example of responsible demonstration of where a U.S. government agency is in contributing towards the success of the decade is I'm former, Tom is current co-chair of SOST, and I just want to express my delight, Tom, and how rewarding it was for me to work with you in the Subcommittee of Ocean Science and Technology, and along with our colleagues, Alex Eisern and others from NSF who preceded her, and also various OSTP representatives. But Tom, always a delight to work with you, and I'm so glad you're here to join us, in addition to your plenary talk yesterday. So please come forward, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Craig. Caitlin, are we going to show slides at this point? Okay, not just yet. Well, that's okay. So I already had a half an hour to tell you all about the National Oceanographic Partnership Program, NOP, and a little bit about ONR. So I won't repeat a lot of that, but I want to mention the fact that ONR 2 is strongly behind the Ocean Decade. Now, recognize that ONR's budget, a total of $2.5 billion, is a teeny fraction of the DoD budget. The Department of Defense recognizes that climate change is going to make a huge difference in how all of our services operate around the world. And not just in terms of things like combat, but things like humanitarian aid and assistance. And we participated in a number of things over the years. So the Navy, again, is focused underneath the DoD direction on climate change in ways that look primarily at the Navy's infrastructure. But at ONR, we're taking a much broader view than that. I mentioned yesterday that one of the topics that we're particularly focused on is ocean acoustics. It's a national naval responsibility. And so that's one of the areas where we've chosen to move out smartly and establish a program that's called the Maritime Acoustic Environment. Kyle Becker, who is the co-chair of the Interagency Working Group on Ocean Sound and Marine Life, has been the lead on this. Kyle actually holds the purse strings on this program. We've invested $12 million so far in work on the maritime acoustic environment. I think, as most people know, sound is one of the chief ways to observe the ocean. So we're part of the Ocean Revealed foundational topic. Did I get the topic right? And our hope then is that by investing in a program early, that we can attract a snowball and have that roll down the hill and gather that momentum and grow into other things that, of course, we're interested in. A number of the ocean shots are of great interest to us, and we've been discussing with our federal agency colleagues, and I want to specifically mention Dr. Jim McManus, who isn't with us today, but Jim is the new head of the Ocean Sciences program at the National Science Foundation. Jim assures me that they are thinking hard within NSF, which is the 800-pound gorilla here when you're talking science in this country, that they are thinking very hard about exactly how they will participate in the Ocean Decade. But he assures me, and he wanted me to assure you, that that is underway. So we're very much looking forward to partnering with the National Science Foundation and, of course, with NOAA, as we have over the years, and all the other agencies that I laid out that are participants in the National Oceanographic Partnership Program, NOP. So I want to spend just a little bit more time on how the community can leverage NOP as Congress directed us to do, first in 1997 and then reauthorized again in 2021, that this is the organization that should take on these interdisciplinary challenges. And when I say challenges, there are scientific challenges that we want to take on, but it's up to us, those that lead these agencies, to work through some of the difficulties that NOP has had, for example, in moving money between the agencies. Making the decade work boils down to money. Sarah indicated, the incredible corporate interest of course, in the future of not only the country but the globe. There's money out there that wants to work with us, and we need to ask your help to talk to the people that you know, the companies, the organizations, your congressional delegations, and allow them to understand the depth of interest from your communities in solving some of these problems. So, Kyle, if you are here, can you raise your hand? There he is over there. So he's now the focal point. But I want to make it clear that we are already spending money, reasonably big money, but we are very interested in spending more on these topics. I'll stop there and hand it back to Craig. And thank you again.
Thank you very much, Tom. And I actually was trying to spare people like Kyle from the bodily assault of people who are looking for funding. But no, seriously, this is where we need to be working. We need to be plugging program managers from at least the federal sponsorship side. And then we could extend into, under NOP 2.0, the rebirth of the National Ocean Partnership Program that extends beyond the traditional proposal-driven process to not get rid of that, but to add to that the opportunities that we might see between agencies to just bridge, as many agencies have joined ONR in coming together with ocean acoustics or other applications to just get the work done rather than having to do everything through the laborious proposal process. So I hope you'll see more of that, and we definitely want to invite, and I would encourage anyone to grab us to ask the question, if you're from a philanthropy or NGO or other organization, commercial and otherwise, how can I team up with these federal agencies? We've got to make that easier rather than laborious and paperwork rich. Okay, so speaking of an organization, or speaking to an organization that has done that has found a way to be making contributions to Seabed 2030, to be making contributions of data gathered around the world and contributing it to the World Ocean Database, is Ben Williams from Fugro. And Ben is complementing our other colleague who has frequently joined us, David Miller. David has more of the ocean physical mapping, and Ben has the portfolio of the ocean measurements and observations. And one thing you may not realize is how much of that is going on in the commercial sector, which then makes that data available either freely, which is not a profit-generating or sustainable model for a commercial business, but where there are paying customers and then making that information available either to that client, which may be a nation, and then contribute that to the World Ocean Database as well. So Ben, we're glad you're here with us, and welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Craig. First slide. So an introduction. What is a Fugro? So Fugro is a Dutch multinational. We've just celebrated our 60th year anniversary this year. Started as a foundation engineering earth data company 60 years ago, and moved those skills from onshore to offshore. We now support major capital projects, essentially, energy infrastructure across the globe. We do not drill for oil. We provide geodata that informs and supports energy across an array of energy infrastructure projects. Next slide. So why the UN Ocean Decade for Sustainable Development when we're talking about a private company? Well, it really comes down to three things that are so intertwined they're very hard to separate. As a European publicly traded global organization, Fugro has obligations to its shareholders and investors to go beyond just running a profitable business. But there's an obligation to ESG, environmental, societal, and governance targets that specifically ties to Fugro's activities. Fugro's strategy is driven by the mega trends shown here. Fugro's mission to support clients across all sectors, whilst not losing sight of how we can also remain aligned with the needs of these trends. We see population growth. We see 1.5 to 2 degrees C. We see 92% of the population wanting us to operate in a sustainable way. 2 two other items on the slide here is the ocean and our people. Fugro employs over 9,000 people and operates in 59 countries. In line with global population trends, the majority of our people and offices are around the coasts of the global oceans, and the mega trends above not only affect the operations we conduct for our clients, but also the people and their families in these coastal areas. Next slide. As Craig mentioned, large contributions to Seabed 2030. So Fugro owns and operates a fleet of ocean-going survey vessels, and over 5 years ago, we initiated a crowdsourced bathymetry program where we acquire multi-beam bathymetry data during transits as we move our vessels from continent to continent and project to project. We're able to do this because we'll be commissioned to go and survey one location, and then we need to transit to another. So what had to happen was a cultural shift, not a technology shift, not a data shift, a cultural shift that why do we turn off that multi-beam when we leave one project site and turn it back on when we arrive at the next? My colleague David Miller as one of the forward thinkers that really opened that up. As such, since the program's inception, 9 of our vessels have been involved, and we've contributed more than 2 million square kilometers of in-transit bathymetry data that have all been contributed to Seabed 2030. This is greater than the land area of Mexico, and it may not seem like a lot, just Mexico in a big global ocean, but we're still scaling up participation, and we are but one company. You can imagine the power of the crowd if thousands of other vessels were to get involved, and working with our clients to unarchive the project-specific data and get this data into the public space using the vehicle of Seabed 2030. In addition to this, we recently announced at the UN Ocean Conference in Lisbon a partnership with EMODnet bathymetry site to allow faster sharing of the same valuable data, and we hope to grow this agreement to encompass ocean observations in the public space across Europe. Next, I'll comment on some ocean observation. I could actually spend most of the afternoon discussing this as a project I've been involved in since the first website I stood up myself and the first cruise I went to deploy the system. Fugro's been operating a metocean mooring system in support of Shellstone's FPSO in the Gulf of Mexico since 2013. Some of you may know there's a NTL, or a Notice to Leasee requirement in the Gulf of Mexico to measure the currents over the top 1,000 meters of the water column. It's to support safe operations and loop current activity in the Gulf that could impact these facilities. We were able to change the conversation when FPSOs came in and deploy buoy-based systems that also provide meteorological data, waves data, and again, a cultural change of why should that data remain private when we have to share the currents data anyway. The sharing of the data becomes very simple. We had NDBC at the time. We're able to deliver data to NDBC, and they were more than happy to take the additional parameters. So many in the Gulf actually know this as its NDBC ID or WMO ID 42395. This is not an NDBC station. This is not a NOAA station. The data is hosted there. This is a Fugro-owned system that we've been operating to support our client project. It is funded by Shell, so I don't have to ask Kyle for any money. Really capitalizing on FAIR principles. Here's an example of some of the data when Hurricane Laura passed over on its way, on its destructive path to Louisiana back in 2020. So data was transmitted in real time all the way through the storm, survived the storm, stayed on location. The data was used by the National Weather Service and informed hurricane models and hindcasts and assessments. An exciting one is we're celebrating 1 year since our partnership with IOC UNESCO. So 1 year ago, I think it was last week, if it wasn't the week before, Fugro entered into agreement with IOC UNESCO Secretariat to provide staff in kind in support of 2 key working groups. The first focuses on the development of the Ocean Decade Coordination Platform, and the second focuses on Ocean Decade Corporate Data Group, which is co-chaired by Vladimir Ryabin and Mark Heine, Fugro's CEO, and it brings together global private sector stakeholders who own and or collect geodata and with an end goal of unlocking the private stockpiles of data and bringing them into the light, allowing this data to be used in support of the decade. We're thrilled that in the coming weeks, we have 7 market-leading companies, some of our competitors and some of our clients, that will be joining this team and a commitment to the decade and the goals of this group. I can't announce any names at this time because they're still going through IOC vetting, but in the coming weeks, I'm sure there'll be an announcement. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ben. What I'm going to invite folks to do now is get ready to ask your questions, and with the 2 microphones that are on the floor, just go ahead and queue up, and hopefully this series of presentations has given you some things to ponder and ask some questions. So while you're getting your questions ready, I'm going to ask a few of my own, and hopefully that'll stimulate maybe some of your ideas as well. We have time here. We're normally in the rush to hurry up at the close of a panel like this, but you have access to some very unique people here who can either take your comments and act on them or provide you with an answer that's going to be very important for your ability to continue to participate or maybe participate anew in the decade. So let me start with one that it certainly came to mind here for me, and if we could bring Larry and Margaret back up so that the audience here feels their presence as well. We have new funding models in mind. We talked with Tom about NOP 2.0. Sarah had talked about in her most recent career experience with the private sector of recognizing the need for more data and private sector interest in acquiring that. We've heard from Ben how there is a private sector entity that is donating these observations acquired during transit. Larry's work by aggregating and describing with the U.S. committee how the nesting of these individual projects can build into something, and then Margaret's work on the board looking at how we can organize better to make a discrete ask of potential funding sources. So my question to the group, and maybe we can go in order if folks care to offer their view, we'll just repeat the order of the original comments. We now have NOP 2.0, which is the refresh. It's not proposals only. And basically it's a door opening to say, use your imagination for how we can construct the partnerships of the players and participants in the ocean community. So Margaret, I'll start with you, and you have many hats, but principally at least the 2 as the director of a prestigious oceanographic institute and then also in the Decade Board. What's the sense of those 2 communities about new models of funding? Over to you.
Well, I think that let me speak first from the decade point of view. One of the really interesting things that's happened over the last year and a half is the formation of a philanthropy alliance for the decade. And I would characterize the first meeting of that group, which was the last meeting I attended before the lockdown due to COVID, so early March of 2020. I would characterize it as, maybe about 15 philanthropic organizations kind of standing back like this saying, I don't know, you seem to be coming to me asking for a lot of money for things that, that I don't recognize as being in my wheelhouse. And in contrast, we had a meeting in May of this year of the same group, and they were forming alliances to fund pieces of the decade. And that's a lot of movement for philanthropic foundations in a year and a half. And for example, they were forming an alliance around autonomous and robotic technologies. Another group was forming an alliance around capacity development and funding for capacity development. So I think that there's been a lot of movement in how people are looking at this. And then I also think there was a bit of let's wait and see what the science community really wants to do with this decade. So it was hard, I think, for not just US agencies, but other national science agencies to say, okay, we'll commit, X million euros or dollars or pounds or whatever, when they hadn't really seen what the community was going to propose. Now that those activities are taking place and are clear to them, they're more easily able to see what fits into their priorities. And so we're seeing a lot of funding for projects within the various programs. And I should point out that each of those 44 programs is as large in scope as you mentioned the International Decade of Ocean Exploration in the 70s, when we had the manganese nodule program and the climate mapping program and NORPAC, mode and polymode. Those were huge programs. Each of those 44 is at least that big and sometimes bigger. So they're really enormous activities. And nobody's expecting funding agencies to just fund one of those programs wholesale. But we hope that by creating that structure and getting scientists to participate in that and connect their activities together, that funding agencies will really see the leveraging power of the decade.
Margaret, thank you. And Larry, if you could just forgive me, before we leave that, I do want to put the marker out here. Maybe this conference is the format to be bringing a further discussion of at least U.S. philanthropies into the discussion of how to bring that a further step. And maybe, Margaret, one quick follow-up question. Do I take it then affirmatively that the production of a national committee report, whether it's an excellent report I've seen from Japan, from the United States, from other countries, that these U.S. committee reports distilling priorities are having an effect in the eyes of non-governmental funding entities?
Yes, I think that everybody wants to leverage their investment, and I think the magic of these big strategies that lay things out is to show the pathway for leveraging, whether it's for an individual agency or an individual foundation or a scientific group. When you know that your piece fits so well into something that is going to be very big and very influential, it just, it makes you feel like your reach is bigger, whether that's your reach as a scientist or your reach as a funder.
Thank you, Margaret. So, Larry, that's a perfect transition to the skill of the work that the U.S. Committee has done in order to put that nesting and that ascension of priorities together. So, Larry, how might you see these models working, improved models working for collaborative funding?
Yeah, no, I think that's the critical question, and indeed, this was our hope in offering some frameworks, and I think of what we're doing as mini frameworks, and what Margaret is doing with the UN Decade as an even broader framework. And it's conceivable that traditional funding mechanisms can fund a brick here and a brick there and a brick there, but there's no guarantee that the house is going to be built or an essential keystone is going to be missed. And so I think by looking at these projects in their overarching framework, looking at the goals and objectives that they can meet, if the essential pieces are put together, it's never going to be a single funding agency. It's going to have to be a consortium. Part of the beauty of this is to bring in really outside expertise, different social sciences and things that no single funding agency that we have would cover all the pieces of. And so, again, as Margaret said, it's this idea that as you go to an individual funding agency, you can present the larger picture and show where this is an essential piece of a greater goal. And that is a tremendous amount of leverage. From a U.S. perspective, as Tom talked about, the concept of NOP is really, I think, the concept that, from a U.S. perspective, can push things forward. It would have to be even a greater and expanded map, but this idea that the agencies can sit together and all focus on a common theme and, not quite commingle, but come close to commingling funds to achieve this objective, I think will get us a long way. So I have hope that there are mechanisms out there, both at a national level and then fitting that into the larger international picture, because as we coordinate and communicate with what's going on with the decade as a whole, we can say, well, there's a part we don't need to do because the EU is doing that, or other people are doing that, and yet we still achieve the goal. And that's the power here.
And that reaches back to the board's oversight and giving advice to the IOC on, for example, if the EU is doing something, no need to repeat it elsewhere. Let me ask Sarah, Tom, and Ben for your views on this, as lengthy as you'd like to be, but I do note we do have a question from the floor, and I don't want to leave you standing there for very long. So you go right ahead, please.
Okay. So in March of this year, the SOS directed DARNA, the Decade Action Resource Needs Analysis, document to be circulated about how agencies will contribute in kind or directly. And so with that, we have the NOAA Task Force for Decade Action that is reviewing through that and figuring out how we will move going forward. And one piece of that is they will give us directions on fiscal year 25 requests that we'll go through. So that, unfortunately, decade being declared, there is some time then to be able to, for us to take full action with our task force going through that. But directly going back to this foundation piece, we are working, and I can call out this one foundation, the Ocean Foundation, to be able to take some leadership in this space. And in June of this year, there is a consortium of the foundations get together in Monaco for discussions, and so they're bringing forward ideas to that discussion around the Ocean Decade for all the foundations, for foundation, cross-foundation engagement. And separately, we've talked to some other foundations that are also very interested in figuring out how they can take leadership roles and pieces of this, and so we're encouraging that and having those discussions. And what I will say, a recommendation on all of this too, is that foundations and funders of philanthropic types or investors typically like to see in this space, they like to see either starting something or they like to complete something. And so by the decade lasting 10 years, it creates a challenge because, as Margaret said, some people are saying, this is so much that you're asking me for all this stuff that needs to happen. And so breaking it up into the pieces of the milestones that are reached over the decade in those funding requests, we're finding in our engagement with the foundations has been very helpful to discuss and articulate the long-term goals that we're trying to move towards, but also those short-term milestones that they can piece off as well.
Thank you, Sarah. Tom.
Sure. So following up on Sarah's comments there about foundations and philanthropic organizations, it's a bit more difficult typically for us, being part of DoD to work with those organizations, but certainly not impossible. Our strategy has been to use our appropriated NOP funds. So Congress gives us $8 million a year. And as we work through some of those projects that are now encumbering those funds, those will allow us to have starter pots of money then that we can use to build some of these fundamental building blocks then that I think could be added on with other agencies who have, I think, more ability to bring in those foundations and philanthropic roles. One thing we've noticed over the years, though, is the development of research vessels, some of which have state-of-the-art equipment. And so we have used those on occasion, and I think that is an opportunity for us to leverage. And again, working with other countries, I mentioned yesterday when I spoke, developing some of those sustainable scientific expertise in countries. I'll give Vietnam as one example there where we've worked since about 2008 or 2009. And we've introduced a number of observing capabilities, brought models and trained scientists there to work. And those kind of activities, I think, are very appealing to some of the philanthropic organizations. So that's another avenue for us to work more closely with, not so much on the hard science problems maybe, but on some of these sustainability activities that are also a big part of the decade.
Thanks, Larry. Ben?
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, I think I'll go a bit tangential from the funding side into more partnerships, and I see the partnerships as a vehicle to reduce some of the required funding. So I have an example just today I was dealing with before the panel that one of the Navy gliders supporting hurricane research in the Gulf is in distress. So I received a phone call end of last week that it's drifting and quite an expensive $250,000 asset thereabouts. But I have a research cruise going out to Stones 200 miles offshore today. So we're just going to pick it up for an hour of ship time, and I have to pay for the day rate of the vessel anyway. So we've just reduced 3 days of carbon footprint of a separate vessel cruise going out. But these partnerships have come from our work with GCUS over more than a decade, and the trust that's been established. So be able to leverage funding and leverage partnerships has to start with trust. And it can't always be one academic trusting another academic or trusting NOAA and academia. We really need to bring private industry in to pick up on the opportunities, be it free ship time, be it collaborative proposals, be it long-term research and sustained observations.
Key point, the partnerships are built on trust. And I remember a couple of years ago at this forum, I think we were in Alaska, we talked about how one can do business with the government, and it really came down to just building common language and building trust. Thank you, Ben. May we have the question from the floor, please? Thank you for your patience.
Oh, thank you. I'd like to ask a slightly different question. We've been talking about funding pathways. I'd like to ask about maybe technology pathways. I think if we look at the goals of the Ocean Decade and the need of society in general to better understand the ocean and to better manage the ocean, you start thinking about words like transformational or radical or order of magnitude increases in data. And I think we all understand that a huge amount of innovation and technology is needed if we were to achieve those ambitions. And this community, these people here, would be some of the key players to do that. So I'm wondering what the panel thinks about how we can identify the specific technology pathways or the technology needs, and is that best to come sort of grassroots through all the actions that have been identified and the stuff we've seen so far, or is there something else we can do as a community to highlight, here's the thing we really need the most next in technology in order to do those observational and ocean understandings?
Very good, thank you. I appreciate that question. So who would like to take a starting point at that answer?
I could start.
Go ahead, Larry.
Just because it's something we certainly addressed on the National Committee, and I refer you to the National Committee report in the website, which catalogs the 100+ ocean shots that have come in, many of which were focused on exciting new technologies. And the approach we took was to elevate those into really one of the cross-cutting themes, but with the concept of designing the application of those technologies in a whole ocean approach, not just I want to build a better this, I want to build a better that, but what are the key answers we're trying to get, and how do we design a system of systems that will really address the key observations we need to make. So I think it is at the forefront, without question, and with folks like ONR willing to support components of it, I think we'll see some progress there. But sometimes the technology does get lost, I think, and I think the strategy is always to ensure that those technologies are tied into the key science questions, and in our case, for sustainability.
Ben?
Yeah, I could follow on. I mean, the decade often feels like a bushel of apples and not just one apple, and we need to eat it one bite at a time. I think on technology, this is especially critical because we need to solve one problem with one technology, and maybe that technology then expands to 2 or 3 or 4 problems, but we need to get the decade's questions and the cross-cutting themes down to bite-sized pieces that we can focus our technologists on and how they will address and solve those bite-sized components and then build on those successes. If we try and eat the whole bushel at one time, we're not going to manage it.
Sarah?
Yeah.
Thanks, Ben.
I'm spending a lot of time thinking about this question of as this data and technology is coming online, how are we ensuring that it's open data, that it's also in an architecture and structure that then it is accessible, usable? Because so many of these Ocean Decade goals, particularly on parts of equity, on resilience, you need an overlay of the oceanic information of the data that we're getting, but then you need the overlay of the societal components to it. And a lot of that work I see coming out also of AI, machine learning, of the capabilities to be able to overlay these different types of data to be able to reveal insight and what we need to do next. But it will require that data being accessible, being open data, being usable for really large data projects. And so the architecture and use and management of that data will also be a very important investment on top of the technology and delivery of the technology itself.
And I would just chime in there that that is exactly the focus of the foundational theme, Ocean of Data. That it was the IT component, the accessibility component, and what to do with the data. So that also was addressed by the cross-cutting themes report.
I'd like to highlight one piece that I think is an exception to that rule of, getting lost in the individual technologies, and that's this concept of communication between and among all of the things. People talk about an ocean internet of things, and they focus on the things. And we have several leaders in the community that I think are really doing a great job of focusing us on how do we connect all of those and how do we create that ocean equivalent of the internet. And, up here in the air, where it's easy, we have just seen our whole approach to technology transformed by the ability of things to communicate with each other. And we don't have that in the ocean. We have some specific examples like the Ocean Observatory Network, where they created their own network for a few instruments, but something traveling around in the water column can't easily communicate with those, with that instrumentation on the seafloor. And so I think that's a place where we need to think about creating that internet connectivity piece to enable all of the rest of it to really take off and be able to communicate.
Margaret, thank you for raising that Internet of Things underwater. And it brings to mind that there's a lot of potential in some of the technologies that are both on the floor at the exhibit space here, and then that are also in the minds and hands of people who are just walking the exhibit floor who maybe don't have the means to put a booth up just yet. So maybe sometime in the future we could be looking at Oceans meetings where we organize those people that Sarah has spoken of, where we look at NGOs who are really good at amassing resources to get something done, looking at philanthropies, looking at potentially funding entities, and walk them through the floor the way that we walk heads of agencies through the floor, right? It's the same value that we might seek to achieve in order to use this conference as a vehicle to be getting those new starts and those key technologies that aren't quite ripe yet, but how many technologies do we need to build in order to get Seabed 2030 attained by the year 2030? Right? We know we can't do that with surface ships. We know that's going to be a new technology. Question from the floor, please.
Craig, for that perfect segue. I'm Alessandra Bianchi with a solar-powered affordable boat drone maker called SeaTrack. And Ben, how do you eat a bushel? I was going to say, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? And the Seabed 2030 goals, the Ocean Exploration Cooperative Institute, which has the giant elephant of 3 billion acres of submerged territory to map. We feel our little boat can help in that project, especially in the really shallow parts of the EEZ. And I am having a very challenging time trying to figure out who to ask to get a chance to take one bite out of that massive project. So any concrete ways to approach the monolithic, magnificent global ocean community and scientists we have here,
Yes.
concrete
Yes.
advice of how a private sector small company can participate would be welcome. Thank you.
Excellent question, and I think the answers to those questions will be useful for many companies, technologies, et cetera. So not just an apple to bite, but a mountain to climb. So ideas, folks, from the panel?
Each
Well,
ag-
Go ahead, somebody else, and I'll chime in after.
Yeah, go ahead, Sarah, yeah.
I was quickly going to say that each agency has a technological partnership office that you can reach out to and find the right place for where you need to make that transition and they also have funding opportunities, particularly for small businesses. Depending on your business stage, there are SBIR programs, but then there's also connectivity into later stage programs for development of this, and NOAA has programs, DOE has programs, even NASA has programs right now along this.
Yeah, and chiming in on that, so we at ONR have just set up a sub-command, I guess we'd call it, called Naval X, and they've established technology transfer centers all over the country. And I'd invite you to chat with me after, and I can connect you up with the leadership there.
And from a CBED 2030 perspective, if you just send me an email, we'll put you in touch with that component of CBED 2030 that's looking at new technologies. So happy to do that.
And we've already had meetings and discussions about ocean current measurements as well. But yeah, probably looking at partnerships. You know, our in-kind contributions from vessels in transit to CBED 2030 don't really leave room for bringing in new technologies or changes with the funding mechanisms as they sit right now. But through partnerships and utilizing existing data flows that get data moved from a new technology into CBED 2030, we could definitely support with, and happy to have that conversation involving Larry as well.
Thank you,
So
everyone.
maybe in a future Oceans, I'm going back to, I think I said it was 2013 in Anchorage, where we had a panel that had government representatives explain to the members or the attendees of the conference, how do you do business with the government? So maybe we could put something together. I'm looking at Zdenka, who, as current president, outgoing. Where's Justin Manley as the where is our next man? But where might we go with this? I think this professional gathering could be a good place where you have those people seated and people could make a direct contact with them. Do we have one final question as we're closing in at the top of the hour?
Yeah, thanks. I just want to address the online platform, make sure that we're grabbing them as well. But there's a final question that how can we exploit new autonomous systems to extend observations for ocean decades?
I think there's a great need for that. Views, folks?
Well, I'll jump right in on that. Since we've been working on autonomous systems for a long time now, we still have a long way to go. If you have a small system, power is always a problem. So people who are working on fundamental ways to increase the energy, perhaps by collecting it as you travel, those are going to give us the opportunity to start to sample the ocean in the way that we need to. You can look at the number of Argo floats out there, 4,000-ish. You know, you look at the rest of the drifters and other things, add another 5,000, say. That's incredibly undersampled. So the continued development of autonomous vehicles is something of great interest to us, including not only, you know, the truck that carries the sensors, and it depends what you're trying to measure. All of those things are of fundamental interest to us, and I'm sure to other agencies as well. And we work closely with NOAA on uncrewed undersea vehicles. We, you know, have maintained a partnership there for many years, and are eager to do that with other agencies and private companies in particular. So that's a huge, deep question with, we need more answers. Putting things in the ocean and allowing them to operate autonomously for more than a couple days still really hasn't happened. And that's a major goal of, I think, of all of us, to be able to sample the ocean the way that it needs to be sampled.
And I
Thank
can
you, Tom.
comment a bit more from the sort of practical, operational side of some of the partners that we may not have in the room, the Coast Guards and the foreign navies, that when we transit in and out of EEZs for the purpose of research, how do we not have our uncrewed vehicle confiscated, damaged, ending up in lawsuits? How do we get the data back? We need to have those conversations and bring those partners to the table as well. I don't have the privilege of the Navy sailing uncrewed vessel.
That's a reality. Go ahead, Sarah.
And very quickly, I'll say that we are really excited about the potential for it, and so we're testing it out, testing out new technologies, trying to be innovative. Some may fail, and I think we need to all recognize that with humility, but we are willing to try and figure out, and I think they do have a really important role going forward.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are just at the front end of the top of the hour, which means that we're in danger of running over, and I won't do that to my good friend Ray Toll. But I want to recognize what we've heard here today, and in summation, with these voices of expertise who were part of generating the decade, part of distilling the decade, part of implementing the decade from government, private sector, and at intergovernmental levels, I think the ambition that was originally hoped for in creating this UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, we have been successful at this point, up to this point. We will continue to be successful based on what we've heard here today. So, Margaret, thank you for the perspective coming from the heart of the IOC and where the discussions are happening about how the advisory board is able to guide the decade in its further development. Larry, congratulations on the wonderful work from the U.S. committee in giving us that hierarchy of understanding that really should be a clearer pathway. And to Sarah and to Tom, as representatives of very important and enabling federal agencies that will be delivering the resources, are delivering the resources for the decade, thank you for contributing. We look forward to further conversations where we could be including other federal agencies in a roundtable to understand this. But the SOST work, the Subcommittee on Ocean Science and Technology, and the National Ocean Partnership Program being formats for that. And then, Ben, the commercial sector's contribution, where I would hope that multiple commercial entities could take the same kind of view that your firm is demonstrating in its leadership. So in closing, before I thank the panelists, I want to thank Ray Toll for giving us the inspiration to put this panel together. Thank you, Ray. And I also want to thank Caitlin Lang, who is from NOAA and helped us organize all the mechanics of this. Caitlin, thank you very much. And to Liz Turpak as well, who back at NOAA, you and she are really organizing things in a great way for the U.S. federal side. So please join me in thanking this wonderful panel. Larry, Margaret, Sarah, Tom, Ben, thank you very much.
our partners at IEEE OES, our professional conference organizer, MCI USA, VeraPrize, our sponsors, our patrons, and our exhibitors, and most importantly, our attendees who are with us today. Am I driving slides? I'm not sure. Okay, next slide, please. I don't have a clicker here. Thank you. So before I share highlights of MTS engagement, I'd like to take a moment to recognize those close friends that we have lost over the last year. Their contributions to the field live on, and their impact will be felt well into the future. Ann Jockins, Texas A&M, College Station, MTS Life member, MTS Journal editor, long-term GQ's executive director. Charles Richard, Houston section, MTS fellow, Life member, Houston section leader, a stalwart in our community. John Vernberg, University of South Carolina, marine biologist and preeminent scholar of the Southeast U.S. coastal environment, and an inspiration to me in my career, which is where I went to school. Russ Davis, someone we all have looked up to, Scripps Institute of Oceanography, innovative scientist and engineer who invented the early float technologies that underpin the very successful global Argo system. And Wayne Ingram, MTS past president, offshore oil field energy expert and industry leader. And as you all know, we had a dedication and celebration for Dr. Larry Atkinson, who actually passed a year ago, and we acknowledged him last year, but all stalwarts in our community whose legacy we honor. Next slide, please. So MTS is a member-led community organization, yet we could not sustain our broad range of programs without the voluntary service of our board of directors and the professional support that is provided by our amazing headquarters team. So I take this opportunity to thank my fellow board members who guide our growth. We represent the interests of the entire member ecosystem, and we are always eager to learn how we make MTS work better for you. Next slide, please. For those of you who have not yet had a chance to meet our wonderful headquarters staff, I'd like to introduce them to you now. Chris Ostrander, our executive director, began in March after a very competitive process. Christina Norman is our deputy executive director and director of events. Monica Ostrander is director of programs. Amy Morganite is our managing editor of the MTS Journal, and our newest member of our team, Claire Idell, who is our director of management engagement. I really want to thank our team. They put in a significant amount of hard work behind the scenes, not only to support the board activities, to support all the committee activities, the section activities, and certainly here at Oceans. So please stop by the booth and have a chance to see them. And for those of you who might not be MTS members, please know that as part of your conference registration, you can have a complimentary MTS membership, so we'd love to have you as part of our group here. Next slide, please. For the past 60 years, MTS has served as a global convener and steward of the marine technology community. Our founders believed in the advancement and the development and the use of marine technology would be essential to support responsible and sustainable use of the oceans. Our growing collective dependencies on oceans for energy, transportation, protein, marine minerals, and ecosystem services underlines how right they were. Given the focus of the UN Decade of Ocean Science, which we just heard about, and the blue economy, our mission couldn't be more timely or urgent. And I like to frame the efforts of the marine technology around three core pillars. We connect, we communicate, and we catalyze action. Next slide. So when we connect, we talk about our membership. The core of our mission as a member organization is connection. We exist to support a community of businesses, institutes, professionals, academics, and students who are ocean engineers, technologists, policymakers, and educators. The community has shaken off the impacts of the pandemic and the economic turbulence, and I'm proud to announce that we are once again growing. MTS membership has grown by 15% this year, and we are certainly expecting this growth to be sustained and to be durable. Next slide. Thank you. Growth in membership, while essential to an organization like MTS, is not alone to sufficiently measure progress. There's a common saying that talent is equally distributed, but opportunity is not. For both MTS as an organization and for the global marine technology community, it is essential that we extend opportunity to those communities that are historically underrepresented or underserved, so they can actualize their potential. Doing the right thing provides a two-way benefit. Our ecosystem will benefit from the richness of ideas and lived experiences that come from a diverse community of members, and our organization members, companies, and agencies will find a new cachet that comes from their employee ranks being representatives of the community that we work with and we work in. This summer, MTS was invited to join a cohort of professional societies for a one-year engagement in the National Science Foundation funded program called Access Plus. Through our engagement with Access Plus, and alongside peers like the American Meteorological Society and the American Fisheries Society, MTS is supporting change within our own community and across the STEM spectrum. Alongside our existing Women's Leadership in Marine Technology initiative, including in-person and online programming that has reached thousands of people, we will continue to develop new and inclusive programming that expands and enriches our community while adapting policies and procedures to ensure everyone who finds the community of MTS chooses to stay. And I please note, tomorrow we have our entire day dedicated, which starts with our Women in Engineering breakfast, our lunch, and town hall. So next slide, please. Individuals and organizations do not join MTS just for individual enrichment engagement. We hear from our memberships consistently that network connection MTS enables are of incredible value. Through our committees and our sections, we enable networks that make the professional world smaller and bring folks closer together. From San Diego to Boston and Houston to India, our sections continue to bring folks together for in-person events and engagement. We are happy to welcome 2 new sections to the MTS family in Nova Scotia and in the Western Saudi Arabia. Both are in initial stages of formation. In-person events are thriving. The Oceans in Actions on the Gulf Coast and the most recent 14th Buoy Center set new attendance record. The Dynamic Positioning Committee hosted their annual conference in Houston last week and are building on the momentum from our offshore wind town hall yesterday. MTS will soon launch an offshore wind committee. We had 31 people who signed up with interest. If you're interested, please see us at the booth. Next slide. For more than 55 years, the MTS Journal has served as a vehicle to foster scientific discussion and promote broader understanding of the marine technology community. To ensure the journal could reach the broadest possible audience, in 2011, we transitioned the journal to a fully digital publication. MTS members have exclusive access to the last 12 months of content, with all prior issues back to 1999 available online as open access to anyone. This shift has driven a consistent and growing amount of traffic to the journal. Ingentia curates more than 11,000 online publications. The MTS Journal is regularly among the top 25 most downloaded and accessed properties in their system. Since launching last year, we've seen more than 25,000 articles downloaded. Our community engagement beyond the pages of the journal, and MTS is active in driving discussion and supporting a dialogue across multiple channels. In partnership with SUT, MTS publishes the bi-monthly Underwater Technology 2 and the quarterly Underwater Robotics magazines. These high-quality publications provide rich content covering a focused range of marine technology subjects, including offshore energy, marine renewables, subsea engineering, ocean resources, diving and manned submersibles, underwater science, and robotics. More than ever, our community looks online for engagement, and MTS manages multiple forums to bring the community together and share the latest MTS news and community. In the last 2 months, we've updated the virtual presentation of our monthly newsletter, Currents, and we have updated the content to reflect the information and needs of our community. We encourage you to join your colleagues and peers as part of the LinkedIn MTS group and the Women's Leadership in Marine Technology and Science group. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn, and share your voice in our community conversations. Next slide, please. Our members tell us that we recognize that membership in the MTS community provides unrivaled benefits for establishing professionals across the ecosystem. Membership in the community also provides unique opportunities for our students and our early career members, and MTS is doubling down on the efforts to expand opportunities for our younger members. This year, we launched the Emerge Initiative, a fully funded and mentor-guided program designed to enhance the ocean's experience for a cohort of students and early career ocean professionals. We are delighted that we were able to sponsor 10 participants that have joined us in Hampton Roads this year. Since our inception, MTS has awarded more than $1 million in scholarships and supports to students. This year, we're delighted to invest more than $50,000 in scholarships and Emerge support for our students and early career members. We were excited this morning to have 75 individuals at our combined ECOP and Young Professionals breakfast this morning. It was so exciting, and we're very much looking forward to seeing that effort grow. Through these funding opportunities, coupled with job fairs, hands-on learning, camp experience, and structured professional and career development programming, will support the transition of our students and early career members as they progress through the first 10 years of their professional careers. Next slide, please. To support the career progression and ensure the experiential learning that is so critical to professional growth in our industry is quantified, valued, and recognized. MTS has partnered with SUT and IMRS to extend the Marine Science and Marine Technology Certification Series to all MTS members. These certifications, structured to align with the stage of career progression, afford our members a globally recognized professional credential specific to the marine technology industry. I'd like to recognize George Hall. He's the newest member to join the prestigious rank of the CMAR Tech community. George is a marine and port engineer and subject matter expert in the operation and maintenance of industrial and utility power plants. Congratulations, George, on earning this credential, and we encourage more members to consider applying for CMAR Tech and CMAR Sci family of professional credentials. We are also exploring in the area of micro-credentialing that will allow us to broaden this certification to more diverse groups within MTS. Next slide, please. MTS is a global organization with membership spanning private, government, academic, and nonprofit sectors. This reach allows MTS to act as a neutral convener, bringing people together from all over the community to address common priorities, which we just heard significantly in the panel from the UN Decade. And so this year, we partnered with the Global Ocean Observing System and NOAA to address how the public and private sector can evolve a global ocean observing ecosystem to meet the present and future needs of science, society, and the blue economy. Through a 4-part online forum we call Dialogues with Industry, we bring together representatives from established companies, startups, academia, government to develop actionable recommendations. The final outcomes of the dialogues will be available early next year. To shape the state of recommendations, we encourage you to participate in the conversations. We have 2 more, the next one scheduled on the 7th of December and the final one on the 10th of January. Please go to the MTS website or to the GOOS website to find out more information. Next slide, please. I am particularly delighted with this effort. Last week, MTS announced the exciting new development for the Society and our broader marine technology community. After 20 years of close collaboration and partnership, MTS and Mate ROV Competition have agreed to join forces on our shared mission to foster the next generation of ocean leaders. Through an integration of Mate 2, the management organization behind the competition, into MTS, we will be able to expand efforts to raise awareness about the importance of marine technology, lower the barriers of entry of underwater robotics and related industries, support students, and help the next generation of marine technology leaders develop the confidence and skill needed to lead our industry into the future. This merger is an exciting homecoming for Mate 2. The organization's renowned competition was created in partnership with the MTS ROV Committee in 2001 as an answer to industry-wide call for emerging talent. We are certainly thrilled to welcome Jill Zandi, longtime MTS member, fellow CMAR Tech, Executive Director of Mate 2, into the MTS organization, and we look forward to sustaining the exceptional Mate competition for decades to come. I am so excited about this. So let's move forward to next slide, upcoming events. So as we work to finalize the integration of Mate into MTS, we're already busy planning community engagement opportunities for 2023 and beyond. We hope to see you in the spring at one of the 40+ Mate ROV regional competitions in your area. And in June, Oceans will be in Limerick, and in September in the Gulf Coast. I also would like to highlight a recent partnership with SUT, our MTS section in San Diego, and Reed Exhibition, where we are providing support to the conference for OI North America. So I encourage all of our members to take advantage of the numerous online and in-person events, and be on the lookout on the website, on LinkedIn, and our monthly newsletter Currents for other activities as they develop. Next slide, please. So each fall, MTS welcomes new members to serve on the board. And I need to thank our departing Vice President of Early Career Ocean Professional, our first Vice President of Early Career Ocean Professional, which we enacted as a board 2 years ago. So Dr. Alfredo Giron has supported the growth of the ECOP membership since its inception. Alfredo recently joined the World Economic Forum as a program lead for Oceans Action Agenda. He, along with Joshua Baghdadi, who is the ECOP section, and Josh Cohunt, our Vice President of Education, put together this Emerge program. So there's very lasting and impactful impact even in the 2 years that Alfredo has been on the board. And I will note that his engagement with MTS started with a Walter Monk Award, which we'll hear about later, and it's just the nice synergy how this works together as we work forward. So Alfredo couldn't be with us here today, but really from the bottom of the entire board's heart and the MTS community, thank you so much for your service. So now to elections. So if we can have the next slide, please. So this year's elections were particularly competitive, and I'd like to thank all of our candidates for stepping forward to serving their community. Our election is now closed, and I am delighted to announce this year's member selection. Returning with us are Jerry Miller, our Vice President of Government and Public Affairs, and Josh Cohunt, our Vice President for Education. So we're thrilled that we'll have them for another 3 years. Our president-elect is Susan Hunt. Susan Hunt is Canadian. We now will have 4 Canadians on the board, if I've got that count right. She is with the Ocean Superclusters, and we are thrilled for her to join our ranks. And Catherine Weathers, who you saw up here yesterday as the deputy chair for the conference on the LSC for the conference in Gulfport, will be our new vice president for early career ocean professionals. So I welcome them to the board, and we certainly look forward to having them work with us and continue the very exciting opportunities that we have, that we've been laying out and moving forward on. So now I'm going to switch gears, and we're going to move to the awards section of the presentation. And we will be doing this in an online fashion as well as in person. So I will switch here. So the first is our Outstanding Students section. And I have to see, I have to move here so I can see who's online. I'm sorry. Okay, so our Outstanding Students section presented, and this is presented to an established MTS students section, demonstrating superior performance in the advancement of the Society's objectives. This year's award recipient is Sri Saram College of Engineering Students section is receiving this award in their development of innovative webinars, workshops, and activities exclusively designed by students under the guidance of their academicians. The students have participated in the MTS NANDA Student Innovation Award Competition, the Student Autonomous Underwater Vehicle SAVE India Competition, and Together 21, the Entrepreneurship Boot Camp and Venture Competition, and the Smart India Hackathon. So they have obviously been very busy. So receiving the award, I think, is Shri Kishari. Are you online here? And I'm not seeing her online. Is she there? Shri? There she is.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah.
Can we get her on screen here? We're just trying to get your video up. Hang with us.
Hello.
Go ahead, Cherie. So congratulations for all the effort that you all have put forward. There you are. Okay, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. First, I would like to express my gratitude toward MTS and also to my institution and management and principals who supported every time, every stage, even my mentors and the team members who supported me throughout. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next is the Outstanding Service Award. So the Outstanding Service Award is presented to an MTS in recognition of accomplishments of fulfilling the objectives and the mission of the Marine Technology Society. And the recipient of the award this year, I'm looking around the room, is Ray Toll. Is Ray here? Oh, there he is. Come on up, Ray. Come on up, shipmate. So I think it goes without saying that Ray gives tirelessly to MTS. You know, the chair of 2012, the co-chair of 2022, past president, the brilliant mind behind the idea of TechSurge, and the list goes on, and a particularly close friend and mentor and shipmate of mine. So congratulations, Ray. Thank you.
Just real quickly, Snake and I both served as naval oceanographers. For me, it was 26 years. I think for you, about the same. And in 2004, I retired, and I was wondering, how can I continue my passion? Thanks to Larry Atkinson, he introduced me, and we decided to start that MTS Hampton Roads section, which led to these 2 Oceans conferences. Thank you all. It's been a wonderful, wonderful post-Navy career for me, and I thank the Society for that. Thank you.
So our next award is the John P. Craven Mentor Award. Recognize the long and impactful career of past MTS President John Pena Craven. The John P. Craven Mentor Award is presented to an individual who has demonstrated outstanding and sustained service to the field of marine technology through mentoring. This year's recipient, Dr. Preetha Rosalind. Dr. Rosalind is a dedicated teacher with over 20 years of experience and is an active researcher in the field of renewable energy and smart grid technology. Under her guidance, many of her students have received scholarships, project funding, and internship. She has organized 30 technical training programs, workshops, seminars for the undergraduate and postgraduate students through the SRM MTS student section. I'd like to bring Sarah Craven, John's daughter, on the screen for her to present this prestigious award. So can we also have Sarah on the screen? Great. Sarah, over to you.
Thank you so much. I just have to say, Dr. Rosalind, how I'm very moved by getting to present this award to you today that was named after my father. I was so inspired in reading and all of the work you have done as a mentor, as an innovator, as a teacher, and the work you're doing to sustain renewable energy in creative and innovative ways. My father loved India. It was a place that he had many wonderful professional interactions and engagements. And he was also a champion for smart, bright scientists such as you. So congratulations. And really, I am in awe of the work that you have done, and in particular, the energy and commitment you have done to bring other young people into the field and to mentor them and to teach them. So congratulations, and thank you to the Marine Technology Society for inviting me here today on behalf of our family. Bravo.
Great, thank you. And Dr. Rosalind, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm extremely honored to receive the John P. Craven Mentor Award. As ma'am said, I have seen his bibliography in what ways he has done his work, so I'm much impressed, and I'm honored to receive the award. I'm earnestly grateful for the recognition that I have received for my work, because I'm very sure that every other nominee for this award are worthy to receive this award. On behalf of MTS India section, I extremely thank the MTS Society and executive members to select my nomination for this award. I personally thank MTS India section chairman, Dr. R. Venkatesan, who has been the driving force behind all the achievements in MTS India section. I extend my sincere thanks to my institution, SRM Institute of Science and Technology, who has supported the student chapter in tremendous way, who drive the SRM student chapter to receive the Outstanding Student Section Award in the year 2019. I thank my family members also for supporting me for all my endeavors. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you. So now I'd ask Mary Monk to join me up here at the podium. So we are now going to award the Walter Monk Award. The Walter Monk Scholar Award is jointly sponsored by MTS and the Walter Monk Foundation. So let me turn it over to Mary for a few words and the awarding of the Scholar Award for this year.
Thank you. What a wonderful way to celebrate what would have been Walter Monk's 105th birthday. We all thought he would live forever, and he will, at least in our hearts. The Walter Monk Student Scholar Award is jointly sponsored by the Walter Monk Foundation for the Oceans and the Marine Technology Society, and it recognizes outstanding contributions made to science by an undergraduate, graduate, or postdoc. The award, established in 2019 under the leadership of MTS fellow Andy Clark, honors Walter Monk's legacy of daring exploration and discovery through scientific research, education, and ocean conservation. Alfredo Garrone, the first recipient of the award, worked with MTS to create a much-needed early career ocean professionals program, ECOP, to mentor young scientists in various aspects of capacity development, networking, and career development. That led to creation of the VP of ECOP position on the MTS board, and most recently, the establishment of the eMERGE program, a clear demonstration of MTS's commitment to supporting our future leaders in marine technology. Huge kudos to MTS leadership for their vision. Before I introduce you to this year's recipient of the Walter Monks Student Scholar Award, I'd like to acknowledge Liza Wright Fairbanks in the audience, our 2021 award winning, as she was unable to attend the meeting last year due to COVID. She's doing great work at NOAA in their ocean acidification program. Now I'd like to introduce you to this year's recipient of the Walter Munk Student Scholar Award. Fascinated by nature since she was very young, living along the beautiful coast of Spain and growing up in a family full of biologists, Marta Diaz Palacios developed a love for the sea. She received her BS in Biological Sciences from the University of Madrid and La Laguna University in the Canary Islands. During her master's research, she described the first nursery area for Mobula munkianas named after Walter, located in the Baja Peninsula, where she had been tagging and acoustically tracking them for several years. Marta is a PhD candidate at CICIMAR, Baja California Sur, studying the conservation and management of mobulas taken incidentally in artisanal fisheries in Mexico. Dr. Felipe Galvin at CICIMAR and Dr. Don Kroll at UC Santa Cruz are her advisors. As a result of Marta's collaborative work with the Mexican government, fishermen, ecotourism industry, and local community members, management guidelines have been established for protection of the Mobula munkianas in the marine protected areas of Espiritu Santo Archipelago. Never get that right. Marta's outreach efforts are broad, and she particularly enjoys introducing young students to the ocean and Monk's Devil Ray. Most importantly, much like Walter, Marta has enduring passion for the ocean. We're extremely pleased to recognize Marta with Walter Munk Student Scholar Award and look forward to her talk in November. Congratulations, Marta.
Marta, go ahead.
Thank you, Mary, for these kind words, as always. And I would like to thank as well to the Marine Technology Society and the Walter Munk Foundation for the Oceans for giving me this award, and for all the support that the foundation has provided me during my PhD, working towards the understanding and conservation of mobula rays in Mexico. I would like to thank as well this award and like the work they are doing every day to the local communities in Baja California Sur that has helped in these 6 years. The fishermen families of the Cuevas family and the Cero families in Pardito and Aguamarga, among many others. And I would like to thank all the researchers and scientists that have mentored, helped, and encouraged me along the way to keep exploring and never give up. So thank you so much for this award, and hope to use this to great discoveries in the future.
And Marta will be presenting her commemorative lecture virtually on November 16th at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and registration is available on the MTS website. So next we move to the ONNT Young Professional Award, and if Lisa Chilik will join me up here on the stage. So sponsored by Ocean News and Technology magazine, which has provided essential intelligence for industry executives and decision makers for nearly 40 years, MTS would like to thank Ocean News and Technology for their ongoing sponsorship of the award. This year's recipient, Cassidy Gonzalez Morbito, Ms. Gonzalez Morbito is being recognized for her work in the test and integration of software to support naval operations. She has led the updated release of multiple test software packages, which have improved test reliability, reduced false failure rates, increased test speed, and updated instrumentation and simplified operations. This test software packages are used to provide confidence to electronic countermeasure ECM units before they're deployed in naval aircraft. So Lisa, if you could come up, and our award winner, is she here?
Yes, she's here.
Yeah, she's there, she's coming. Lisa, would you like to say a few words?
Would, thank you. Thank you. Excuse me. Well, good morning or afternoon or evening from wherever you're joining us. My name is Lisa Chillick, and on behalf of the team at ONNT, I am delighted to present Cassidy Gonzalez Morbito with the Ocean News and Technology Early Career Ocean Professional Award. At ONNT, we are always on the lookout for what's next, emerging trends, breakthrough technologies, pioneering projects, and of course, the industry's budding talent. In Ms. Gonzalez, we have clearly identified a rising star, and her impressive achievements to date perfectly encapsulate what this award is all about. Whether it's her research into the flight dynamics of Slocum gliders, her experience in developing subsea data acquisition programs for the U.S. Navy at NAVSEA, or the fine work she is doing today at L3 Harris, Cassidy's contribution to the field of marine technology both belies her years and demonstrates that she has a very bright future. Congratulations, Cassidy. Award.
Picture there.
Yes?
Yep.
Hi everyone, thank you for being here. I'm shy when it comes to public speaking, but I want to say something real quick. I would just like to give thanks quickly to everyone that I've had the pleasure of talking to and working with along the way, which includes everyone at the Rutgers RU Cool Group, Lisa with MTS, and then everyone else that I don't necessarily have time to list. Today I wouldn't be here without your support. Thank you.
So great, thank you. ONT is very gracious with a plaque, $1,000 check, and this also comes with a 2-year membership to the Marine Technology Society. So our next award is the Lockheed Martin Award for Ocean Science, and I'm going to turn this over to Malik Dyer to do the presentation, and Dr. Jan Newton, if you will proceed to the stage. Please.
Dr. Newton has made significant contributions to the design and development of sustained ocean observing, data analysis, and forecasting. She led the coordination between IOOS, NOAA, and the shellfish growers to research and mitigate ocean acidification that nearly devastated a $5 billion industry within the US. Dr. Newton is globally recognized as an expert in this field and is a co-founder and co-chair of the Global Ocean Acidification Network. Lockheed Martin is pleased to present the Lockheed Martin Award for Ocean Science and Engineering to Dr. Jan Newton, Executive Director, Northwest Association of the Networked Ocean Observing Systems, and Senior Principal Oceanographer and Affiliated Professor, University of Washington, for Dr. Newton's demonstrated high degree of technical accomplishments in her field. Congratulations, Dr. Newton.
Well, thank you so much, Malik, for those really kind words. And I stand here just flabbergasted and also so immensely grateful. And I do want to iterate that I share this award with so many people in the IUS family and NANUS and in Go On. And it really is such an honor to be able to take information that comes from the oceans and really try to get it into the hands of many people, whether they're a shellfish grower in the Pacific Northwest or an oceanographer in Fiji or Liberia wanting to understand ocean acidification. It's truly an amazing opportunity. But I have to say, I am someone who uses marine technology tools. I have not developed them. And so my final thanks goes to the Marine Technology Society and community, because it's through your work that all of the rest of us get to try to use those tools. And I just want to say thank you for your wisdom and your creativity, and I look forward to where we're going in the future. Thank you so much.
I now have the honor to bestow MTS Fellow on 3 individuals. So designation as the Marine Technology Society Fellow is one of the highest accolades a member can achieve. Since 1975, this title has been awarded to MTS members who have made outstanding contributions to the advancement of the Society's objectives and who have distinguished accomplishments and experience in their professional fields. This is a capped amount of folks that we are able to give this award to each year. And I have to tell you that we had a very competitive and a large slate of MTS fellows to choose from this year. So it is certainly my honor to recognize the 3 that we'll be bestowing fellow on. The first individual is Ms. Donna Kosak, who many of you know because she has been up here in my position. She has actively supported MTS as president, as vice president of publications, chair of the Underwater Imaging Committee, founder of the Ocean Observing Systems Committee. Additionally, she co-chairs the Joint Oceans Administrative Board and is the MTS liaison to the Ocean Decade. Donna has over 30 years of experience in design, developing, testing of many scientific and engineering projects involving computer vision, underwater imaging, and communications in ocean observing and space satellite. It is certainly my honor to present fellow to Donna, so if you can join me up here on the stage. So, well-deserved, long overdue. Okay, the floor is yours.
It's an extreme honor to receive this very important award from MTS. It really is, from my heart. You know, the recognition I certainly share with everybody. This is completely a competitive award, and I know several of the candidates were very worthy, so it's an honor for me to receive this. And I'm privileged to receive it with the 2, Fritz and Don, who I'm receiving it with. MTS, it's very important to me because MTS is like my family. Over the past 30 years, 34, 30-something years, I've been attending the conferences like this and all the events. So everybody, I very much appreciate the support I've gotten. And I want to hold this up as a mark of achievement with thanks from everybody who I've worked with. So really an honor. Thank you.
Our second fellow, Mr. Don Peters. Mr. Peters serves as the co-chair of the MTS Buoy Technology Committee, which you heard that we had record crowds to in our 14th meeting, leading community efforts to advance buoy and mooring technology. He's a skillful mentor for many at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute's engineers, and over the past years has designed many mooring systems and components. His work as chief engineer for the redesign of the submersible Alvin, new mooring technology patents, contributions to the National Science Foundation Ocean Observatories Initiative, and support to launch the EOM Offshore LLC has supported fundamental advancements to ocean and marine technology. So Don is unable to join us in person, but Don, congratulations, and over to you.
Well, thank you very, very much. This is indeed a great honor. I'd really like to thank the Marine Technology Society for being there for all of us, a great community, and you really give us a focus and a voice for our industry. It's a great privilege for me to have worked in this field for 30 years and more, and to enjoy a career among so many distinguished and incredible individuals, and to hopefully be in a position to give back to the next generation of young and promising engineers coming up. A couple of names that jump out at me from kind of the past, looking back here. Jerry Milgram, my advisor at MIT, kind of really got me pointed in this direction of ocean engineering. Dan Fry, who hired me at Hui. Walter Paul, who people may know as the father of the stretch hose technology, and taught me a lot about cables and moorings and things like that. Joan and Jerry Stashew, I had the honor to work with during the development of the Nereus vehicle. We had them help us with ceramics. Amazing people to be working with. Barry Walden, Rick, as far as Alvin, that is, Barry Walden brought me into Alvin. Lots and lots of people. It's just overwhelming to try and think of how to thank everyone. Thank you, Rick Cole, my co-chair for the Buoy Workshop, and thank you, MTS. It's, again, a very great honor.
Great. Thank you, Don. So our third fellow, Dr. Fritz Starr, again, no stranger to this audience, longstanding MTS member who served as the MTS Puget Sound Section Chair, and he's now treasurer of the section. He was instrumental in maintaining an active and vibrant section. He served as the chair for the Oceans 2019, as a regional coordinator for the MATE ROV competition in the past 15 years, an affiliated professor with the School of Oceanography at the University of Washington. Dr. Starr has inspired countless students to pursue careers in ocean science and technologies. So it gives me great privilege, Fritz, to bestow this honor to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It's a great honor to receive this award. I just want to thank some folks, a lot of folks who've supported me over the years, especially my wife, who I believe is participating online. It's one of the great things about the pandemic, actually, was that we now can do this virtually and broadcast it around the world, which is really cool. But she supported me in moving into this career over 30 years ago to get into the ocean sciences and the ocean technology. And that was pretty critical to my overall fun factor in life, which a colleague of mine gave me advice on early and said, this is important. I also really want to thank my thesis advisor, Dr. Tom Sanford, who passed away not long ago, a great ocean scientist and a great ocean technologist at the Applied Physics Lab at the University of Washington, and my postdoc advisor, Dr. Russ McDuff, who has also guided me through a lot of transitions, including this most recent one. I'd like to give a shout out to my next chapter, which will be with a little company called Open Ocean Robotics in Victoria, and thanks to Julie Angus, who's here, CEO of the company, and gave me an opportunity to continue my career in the ocean technology business. But thanks to MTS. MTS has been a home for me in many ways. It is a family, as Donna said. It's been a real source of inspiration and community and catalyzation. I think your comment about that is so true, because this society really helps grow the world in that respect. So thank you very much.
So we now have our 3 Compass Awards. So our first is our Compass International Award, and MTS thanks Compass Publishing for their 56 years of sponsoring and recognizing the industry's best of best. And it was in 1966 that Compass Publication President Charles Bussmann initiated these 3 awards, and Amos Bussmann has continued in that tradition. So our first award is the Compass International Award, and it is presented to an individual, company, and organization outside of the United States for outstanding contributions to the advancement of marine technology and science. And this year, it's awarded to Oceans Network Canada. Oceans Network Canada, or ONC, has delivered outstanding advancements in research, development, design, education, and public understanding that has contributed to new information-based blue economy and demonstrates the benefit of public and private investments in our marine technology enterprise. Their infrastructure has provided a profound impact on the world's cabled observatories by bringing cutting-edge, real-time ocean monitoring technologies and operational status, and as well enabled research and education in the ocean sciences based on data that they have generated. So I congratulate ONC on receiving the 2022 Compass International Award, and here to accept the award is a good friend of mine, President and CEO of ONC Canada, Dr. Kate Moran. Kate, over to you. Congratulations.
Thank you so much, Zdenka, and thank you for this award. I'm very proud to lead some of the best ocean engineers, scientists, and technologists in the marine technology ecosystem. And so for those in the room, I know there are many Ocean Networks Canada staff there. I'd ask you to just stand while I deliver these very short remarks. As others have said, this is a great honor for Ocean Networks Canada, and it is humbling to be on stage with those that have the other awardees of the MTS Awards. I want to thank those who nominated us and selected us for this International Compass Award. As Zdenka said, ONC operates ocean observatory infrastructure that supports scientific research, delivers societal benefits, and supports our ocean industry partners that grow the sustainable blue economy, which is critical at this time of increasing climate impacts. We have greatly benefited from the Marine Technology Society, which enables us to stay at the cutting edge of ocean S&T. So to learn more about Ocean Networks Canada, stop by our booth. It's at number 210, and I can tell you that you can actually sign up to win some of the best swag on site. And thank you so much, Zdenka, for this recognition and for your leadership and friendship.
Great. You're so welcome, and congratulations. So our Compass Industrial Award, presented to any legally operating industrial firm, excluding a government and nonprofit organizations, demonstrated outstanding contributions to marine science and technology. This year's Compass Industrial Award is presented to RPS North America. RPS North America is a leading developer in the integration of ocean, coastal, and Great Lakes data, and has revolutionized the application and use of marine data within North America. Their system and technology overlaid with real-time data has increased safety and awareness through partnerships in the public-private sector to address societal challenges. Here to accept the award on behalf of RPS is Executive Director of the Ocean Science, Kelly Nee. Kelly? Congratulations. Picture over here.
Wow, thank you, Zdenka. It's hard to express what winning this award means to us at RPS. For more than 40 years, we've combined science, data, and technology to solve problems that matter, to create shared value, and to really inform responsible use of the marine environment. It's especially sweet to win this award from an organization like MTS. Technology has always differentiated our business. Way back in the 80s, we were developing numerical models to help understand the fate and transport of oil in the environment. In the 90s, we integrated GIS with our models to make sure that our results were more understandable, accessible, more visual, and we started our work on data management systems. In the early 2000s, we partnered with the Coast Guard to release our first production data services system, the Environmental Data Server, which still provides mission-critical data to the U.S. Coast Guard to support the SAR mission today. And for more than 20 years, or almost 20 years, I should say, we've been partnered with the US IUCE to really drive forward data management and cyber infrastructure technologies to meet the needs of the ocean community. The great thing about being involved in this field is that there's always something exciting coming up. And I personally am really looking forward to how we use technology to drive forward in the data management and cyber infrastructure space, how we can leverage the cloud and cloud-native services to improve access to data, to lower barriers for data providers to get into systems like US IUCE. I'm also excited about how we as a community continue to support the offshore wind field. I would like to end today by saying thank you. Thank you to the folks that nominated us. Thank you to MTS for the award. Thank you to our clients over the years who have really treated us like trusted partners and collaborated with us on really interesting and important projects. But most of all, thank you to our staff. It's the entire staff of RPS and their passion for what we do and their commitment to what we do that makes us as successful as we are. So I want to really say thank you to them too.
So our final award today is the Compass Distinguished Achievement Award, and it's presented to an individual whose career is marked by achievement and has significantly impacted the field of marine and science and technology. And it just gives me great pleasure to announce the 2022 recipient is Dr. Deirdre Gibson. I only recently had a chance to meet Dr. Gibson as she has participated in our women's and our diversity efforts here at MTS, and boy, is she absolutely amazing, and it's just been really great, but I'm going to actually read the citation here. So Dr. Gibson is a stalwart and an unparalleled leader in the pursuit of preparing the next generation of African-American marine scientists. While at Hampton University, she has led grant-funded programs from the National Science Foundation, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration to improve student outcomes through research opportunities and work with public school teachers to develop ocean sustainable curriculum. I'd really like to congratulate Deirdre on her tireless work, and in addition to the plaque, we are offering a lifetime membership to MTS. So please, Deirdre, accept this for absolutely amazing, amazing work. Deirdre, over to you.
Oh, thank you so much for this award, and I know I stand between lunch, so I'll make this really quick. I just want to thank Liesl for nominating me for this award and MTS for recognizing the hard work that it takes to recruit African American students, retain African American students, and train African American students to work in this field, to stay in this field, and to be comfortable in moving forward, to get their masters and PhDs. And so Hampton University is a very small private HBCU here in Hampton Roads. And however, we produce, one of the top producers of African American marine science students in the nation. Many of our students go on to master and PhDs, and many of them that you will meet will say that they're from Hampton University, so I'm really proud of that. One of my colleagues asked me, well, he said, I hope that you take this time to reflect on, how you got here and how this award impacts, what you've done. And it did. I started to think back in the 80s when I moved from Louisiana to Seattle, Washington to embark in the marine technology and oceanography technology at a community college, and thought to myself, I really want to do this, and I want to work with students that look like me to do this work. And 35 years later, that's what I get to do. So I just want to thank MTS for all this, acknowledgement and just acknowledging that this is important work. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you. Captain Don Walsh Award for Exploration. We congratulate Dr. Mandy Joy as, I have one final slide here? Do we have the, so I will continue until the slide. We congratulate Dr. Mandy Joy, this year's winner of the Captain Don Walsh. This is jointly done with SUT. We had hoped that Don would be able to join us in person, but he's still recovering from a broken hip. So we will officially present this at Oceanology International North America in February with an Oceanside chat to be held alongside. But I do want to at least congratulate Mandy, give her a chance to say a few remarks now, and then we'll officially do this again in February. Mandy.
Thank you so much. I am just thrilled to receive this award, and I want to thank MTS and the Society for Underwater Technology. I want to thank Liesl for nominating me, and all the engineers and technologists from Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, from the Schmidt Ocean Institute, and from Harbor Branch Oceanographic Institution that I've worked with over the years that have helped us advance and explore the Gulf of Mexico. And I'm really looking forward to being on the stage with Don and Edie in San Diego next year and seeing you all in person. Thanks a lot.
Great, thank you, Mandy. And so we'll do that more officially when we can have them both in person. So I know we're a bit over time here, so let me just finish by saying thank you to our volunteers. MTS continues to be the professional home and community of choice for ocean engineers, educators, policymakers, and scientists. And while I think and hope you've seen that we've accomplished a lot this year, we do that through the volunteers, and we do that through our dedicated members. So if you've served on a committee, or you're a section leader, you're supporting MTS events, you're a committee chair, you're part of the community, and I want to say thank you. And we look forward to chatting with you through the rest of the conference. And thank you to our wonderful AV team who's been just juggling this back and forth. So thank you very much. Thank you to all of you.